in virtual workshops and a virtual meeting. Both will be conducted using Google Meet technology for board members and staff who are participating live. Excuse me. Viewers and listeners can access the meeting today by either watching on Comcast channel 235 or by using the YouTube link on our webpage at palmbeachschools.org. We also offer a listening-only option which the public can access by calling 561-357-5900 or toll-free at 1-866-930-7015. The meeting ID is 1-561-880-1124 #. I now call the workshop of Palm Beach County School Board order at 2 p.m. on August 26, 2020. Mrs. Bass, please call the roll.
District 1, Barbara McQuinn.
Here.
District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill.
Here.
District 4, Erica Whitfield.
Here.
District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Here.
Great, we have quorum with all 7 board members present. Also joining us on our virtual dais is Superintendent Dr. Donald Fenoy, General Counsel Julie Enrico, Inspector General Teresa Michael, and Board Clerk Carol Bass. Senior staff members will join us periodically as directed by the Superintendent. The meeting is being transcribed by a closed captioner, so remember to speak at a reasonable pace. Now please direct your attention to the flag on the screen. Dr. Fenoy, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. A quick review of our meeting protocol. Remember, if you are not speaking, your microphones should be on mute. If you forget, which we all do at times, I've asked the board clerk to mute the microphone for you. If you need to step away from the meeting for a moment, please turn off your camera. For the public's information, when a board member's camera is off, the board member is still present at the meeting and can still hear and see what's happening. Mr. Superintendent, the workshops are all yours.
Thank you, sir. At this time, our first workshop will be on policy 1.03, school board meetings. At this time, Mr. Harris will come forward and speak to that.
Good afternoon. We have a PowerPoint. And I thank Mr. Ruiz for operating it. This is policy 1.03. The revisions mainly deal with health safety protocols for virtual board meetings and meetings during the pandemic. And we're ready for the next slide. And emergency modifications. If you recall, back on July 9th, the board adopted this policy with the emergency as an emergency policy to allow health and safety protocols for when the public enter the building and attend meetings in person, for the virtual meetings, and also for meetings during the pandemic. Now we're going through the regular policy development process since the emergency policy will expire after 90 days. Next. Okay, these are the protocols that currently exist in the emergency policy. They include requiring individuals to have their body temperature taken if a person has 104 or more, denied entrance, requiring individuals to wear face coverings as defined and offered to provide them to those who don't have one. For individuals who will not or cannot wear a face covering, they're going to be separated from those who wear face coverings. Next. Social distancing is required. Public speakers address the board from designated rooms where the speaker and board can see and hear each other, and public comment is governed by the same provisions as applicable in the norm. And failure to adhere to protocols may be grounds for removal. but note that email and voicemail options to continue to provide persons who want to provide public comment that way and don't wish to attend the meeting still exist. Next. And also for in-person meetings, changes that had been adopted where members of the public wearing face coverings would be allowed in the boardroom in accordance with CDC guidelines and limitations on social distancing, but minimal staff would be physically present at the meeting beyond those who sit at the dais with the board. Next. Okay, we have some additional changes to the policy, which is posted for you for the board to consider for the first read. Although school police had recommended about temperatures being taken, we had an issue, so we've added the language in the method prescribed by the district. School police has also recommended hand sanitizer and denial of entry if you don't have your temperature taken or use the hand sanitizer. The facial coverings description has been changed to conform with the definition that we have in other school board emergency policies. Next. Additionally, there may be some protocols that come up later from the CDC or whatnot, and they'll be posted on the board website. We have a link for that, as well as communication. We'll have a banner advertising those for board meetings. And note, and this is already applying, health safety protocols apply to all persons unless otherwise stated, including employees and board members attending the meeting in person or in the district administrative building. Next. School police had some additional recommendations. Where it had stated just a room, now it includes a room or area, because if we get overflow, they may need to use areas like the atrium. That there'll be plexiglass screens placed for the board members, and facial coverings of board members is required when they're moving around and not speaking at the dais. And for when in-person meetings resume, the public would be in designated portions of the boardroom and subject to CDC and state maximum occupancy limits. Next. Also, again, when we resume in person, only essential personnel will be permitted in the portion of the boardroom in close proximity to school board members. Next. There are some additional changes that don't have to deal with health safety. For instance, relating to workshops. We have paragraphs dealing with what board actions are allowed at workshops and on board discussion items, and when board discussion items can be added to the agenda. Plus, there was a request from Dr. Robinson in the public meeting that public comment would also be received at all board public meetings by leaving a voice recorded message. So that would not only be for the pandemic, and per request of Mr. Barbieri at a public meeting, adding to the agenda the Inspector General report. And then we realized we also need to add the superintendent's report to the agenda. Next. I understand that board members do have some other changes they may want to make. Now it's open for discussion and any questions.
Mr. Harris, I have one comment first. I mean, I had asked for that Inspector General, but the board didn't decide on that. So, you know, I appreciate you putting it in there, but certainly the board members didn't agree that they wanted that as part of the agenda. So we need to discuss that before we move any further. Mrs. Andrews, and then Mrs. Rico.
Yes, I had a concern about that because we really don't have the general counsel speaking at each board meeting, and I don't know if we actually need to have the Inspector General on the agenda to speak if there is not anything that she needs to speak about. So as a result, I wondered why we were actually changing that format. So I had a question mark about that.
Mrs. Rico?
Just as a point of information, thank you, Mr. Barbieri and board members. What we tried to do in presenting this this policy in the workshop portion of your consideration was to capture anything we had heard you all discuss relative to these items. So we're not suggesting that anybody wants to do it. It's just that we were just trying to, as best we could, capture all discussion previously about this particular board policy so that the board could have that in front of them as a focal point and have their discussion during this workshop section and then go on to the actual policy development, which will take place at the board meeting following.
Other comments? So let me ask my colleagues, do you feel it's necessary for the Inspector General to be here for all of our regular meetings if she never says anything, gets to say anything? I mean, I don't know what the point is of having her here, you know, for hours at a time. She could be doing something more productive than just watching the board meeting. She can watch the board meeting from her office, for example, and be doing work up there. Mrs. Whitfield?
So are you proposing that she, are you saying that she's attends every one of our meetings, all of our workshops and all those, or just the regular meeting once a month right now?
She's been attending, I think she's here today. She's been attending all of our meetings. Certainly Mr. Chu attended all of our regular meetings. I don't believe he attended the special meetings, but I mean, just my thought is, give her an opportunity on the agenda. She can either say something if she has something to report to the board or not, but to have her sit here every once, you know, for the 5 o'clock meetings and sit here for the entire meeting and not have any time on the agenda to say anything seems kind of pointless to me, but it's up to you all. I see, Mr. Harris, you want to add something legally on this? Because Mrs. Brill wants to talk.
Yes, only to point out that the addition is only for the regular meetings of having an Inspector General report. And by the way, these are items we've put in there. You can accept or reject. You know, you make the decision on that.
Yeah, we understand. Ms. Brill?
Thank you. So I personally would like the Inspector General to give us an update for things that we can be updated on. And of course, as Mr. Barbieri said, if she doesn't have something to say, we don't need to have a report. But I have absolutely no problem with getting a report.
I see Dr. Robinson shaking her head. Yes, Mrs. Whitfield?
I was just going to say, isn't the purpose of staff attending our meetings just in case we have questions? I feel like the reason Ms. Rico speaks so much is because we ask her all kinds of questions all the time. So I don't know. I liked having her here. You know, if we do have Inspector General questions, but if you all don't anticipate that we'll ever have questions for her, then I guess I could understand not having her.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. I'm good with having the placeholder there as has been suggested. Not that it would require that she give a report, but it's a placeholder there in case she has something that she does want to bring forward.
All right. I see Ms. Brill shaking her head. Yes. Are other board members okay with that?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Let me just ask legal really quickly. Is there anything that she's allowed to give reports on, or is it limited based on what she works on?
Sure. So the report could take the form of just updating the board on general process, general activity, obviously within the confines of the confidentiality that Ms. Michael is quite aware of her limitations with respect to publicly sharing the confidential information. But there's certainly, information that could be shared with the board on a regular or intermittent basis, and it would alleviate the necessity to actually bring it as an item. So you would have a standing agenda placeholder, like very similar to the superintendent's report, and it would be for whatever updates or information the Inspector General would wish to report to the board, but would not, as Dr. Robinson said, require a report.
Ms. Brill was first. I'm sorry. Ms. Brill, then Ms. Whitfield.
All I was going to say is that, some of the things that I would love to hear is, how many calls did we get into the hotline? Are we almost done with the school audits? Just very general updates, which would alleviate the very long and lengthy reports we get later on. So, I would like to be updated on those, very general items. I think that it's appropriate.
Mrs. Whitfield.
So just for clarification, should we also have a general counsel report then? If we, if we're doing one of our employees or two of our employees, shouldn't our third employee also give a report?
I would think yes. I mean, we have 3 employees. Why don't we give them all a placeholder and any one of them can talk to us at a board meeting rather than have to do memo after memo after memo after memo. No.
Memos are still going to come.
Ms. Brill.
Thank you. So, of course, general counsel, a lot of what she's dealing with also is going to be confidential. But I think as we transition into our acting general counsel, getting an update, maybe on what's going on in the department, would be nice to have. But again, it would have to be more generalized because, first of all, general counsel, just like the IG, but the IG is more broad, is our general counsel. It's not, she reports to us on our issues. So I wouldn't want to get into a lot of depth, but certainly if they feel it's appropriate, I would be fine with it.
Mrs. Andrews.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think as a placeholder, but I do believe that the IG has quite a bit of confidential information too. So I do believe if we're going to do it, we need to do it for all of our employees to have that placeholder there. So if there is something that's relevant, that's not confidential, that needs to be added or stated, it should be done.
All right, so go ahead, Dr. Robinson.
Well, it's another issue. So did you want to wrap that up?
Yeah, let me finish that. So is there anybody that doesn't want the placeholder for the three employees? All right. Ms. Quinn, I don't see you, but what are you saying?
You don't see me? Okay. I'm not frozen, right? Okay, so no, I just want to clarify that I agree with the placeholder, not required to submit a monthly or whenever board meeting report, just placeholder if there's something she wants to report.
All right, so Mr. Harris, if you could make sure that that's part of the policy, a placeholder for all 3 of our employees.
Sure. When we come to the special meeting, you can vote to add that in, and it'll be added in.
Got it. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Robinson. You had another issue you want to discuss. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually 2. So the first one is just so that I'm clear. So this will not need to be revisited on the other side of the pandemic because you have in paragraph 24 all the in the event of emergency, yada, 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 right? So this is not a like now and then we have to do it again after the pandemic. We can approve this, do the second reading and be done, right? Okay, yes. I just want to make sure.
And paragraph 25 deals with in-person meetings during the pandemic.
Right, thank you. So now another question for you. So lines 46 to 52. So why does a school board discussion item require a good cause statement? We're not going to take action on it except to say, we'll talk about it later. We agree to talk about it later, and then it would be publicly noticed.
The reason I added that in there is under the Florida Administrative Code, and it might also be in the Florida statute, it says any change to the agenda, you need good cause decided by the head of the agency, which is the board chair, basically.
Okay, so, is that a change in the Florida Administrative Code, or we just haven't been doing it properly for 20 years?
Well, I don't want to go into that, but the bottom line, it does say,
bad question.
It does say changes to the agenda after the agenda is posted. good cause to add.
Okay, so just to follow up on that. So if it was a discussion item in the old sense where we were just talking and we would give consensus direction, even though I think, we might consider that a bad word now, you would still have the same answer about requiring good cause statement?
Well, I'm talking about adding discussion items to the agenda.
Right.
I'm talking about adding items to the agenda. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, so whether or not we're going to do the little vote thing on a discussion item, or whether or not we just nod our heads and staff looks to see how many are nodding their head, that does not alter the opinion. It's because it's on the agenda.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mrs. Rico?
Yeah, now I need clarification. We're talking about adding after the agenda closes, after we're already, okay, okay. So after the agenda closes, any discussion item has to be added as good cause?
If it's added after the agenda's posted.
Right. So you know what? It just feels like our arms are being tied behind our backs now. I mean, the point of discussion items is for the board to bring something forward publicly, not to take a formal vote on it. So we went down the road with this that I think we've gone too far, but whatever. But it's just to bring up something in the public, because with Sunshine that we want to share with other board members, right? And so I don't know that these things are always going to meet this definition of good cause. It just feels troublesome to me.
Board members, on this particular point, let us go back and this, because I think if there are, I'd like to explore if there's some language to tell the public that discussion items are blah, 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 and they will be put on in this manner so that we can get the intent of opportunity for public discussion together on various issues that arise. So I'm just going to ask you to let us put a pin in this particular phraseology and see if we can do something about it.
Okay, thank you.
That'd be good, Mrs. Rico, because I foresee a problem. I mean, no matter who the board chair is, if the board chair doesn't like something that's coming forward as a board discussion item from one of the board members, can say, I don't find good cause to add that. So I don't want board members to be silenced by a board chair that just doesn't want to discuss an item. When I put an item on for good cause for the superintendent, he explains to me in advance why it goes there, and the board chair is the one that's got to find good cause. So I don't want to have to weigh in on whether board member discussion items are for good cause, or whoever my successor is shouldn't be faced with that either. Anybody else have any questions on this? Go ahead, Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. Just a really brief one. So at line 427, we're talking about the plexiglass screens being between board members, and then we don't have to wear a mask if we're sitting there. I kind of think that we should, in solidarity with everyone in the building, still wear masks during board meetings, even while we're in between the plexiglass screens. Anybody have any thoughts on that? I know we've been back and forth about people wearing them at their desk, and I just wanted to see what y'all thought.
Dr. Robinson, then Ms. Brill.
I just don't think it belongs in policy.
And if I may, when we wrote that, and I think what I'm nervous about is we have the plexiglass up, but as people experience what we're experiencing now, when your face is covered and you're speaking, they may not be able to understand what you're saying. So I think you've got to give the board members that flexibility when they're speaking to take it off and then put it back on. So that, for our closed caption audiences, there's a lot of reasons why just you guys sitting up there with masks on the entire meeting wouldn't work for the public, in my opinion.
Ms. Brill.
Thank you. And Dr. Fenoy just highlighted what I was going to say. I don't have a problem wearing it, but when I speak, I would want to be able to take it off. And also, when we get to that point where people are coming before us and speaking, I often have difficulty hearing people, and I do a combination of lip reading as well as, listening. So I would have difficulty if people are wearing masks, hearing them from where they sit, out in the audience, and where we are on the dais. So, that would be a concern for me.
God help the board chair having to pull that thing off his ear every 3 seconds. But anyway, every time I call on one of you or whoever comes after me, it's ripping that thing off, putting it back on. It's going to be kind of a hassle, but whatever it takes, whatever you all want to do, I guess we'll deal with it. Is there any other questions on this one? All right, Mr. Superintendent, go ahead, Mr. Harris.
The Chief Kitsero may want to make a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one thing I was just going to also bring up for consideration in the security process is including the standardized questions, the screening questions that are recommended as people come into the facility. It's a small, addition, but I think it's something that's worthwhile from a safety perspective.
Chief, I've got experience in that because every time I come in the building, they ask me those questions. Would you advise the board members what those 4 questions are that are asked?
It basically, the questions center around, have you been in contact with anyone that has tested positive for COVID-19? Have you traveled outside of the country? The other 2, and now you put me under pressure and I'm losing the other 2. Sorry. You probably know them by heart, Mr. Barbieri. Maybe you can help me out.
Oh yeah, okay. Push it back on my plate. Thanks very much. I don't think so.
What we'll do, we'll get that to the board. It's part of our, even for the reentry plan for this particular building, all of that is encompassed in that. So we'll get that in the board office.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
I got that.
Both of the Franks off the hook. Thank you.
So are we done with policy 1.03, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you ready for me to move on, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At this time, we will go to policy 2.067, visitation protocols on district property due to COVID-19 workshop. At this time, I bring forward our Deputy Superintendent Keith Oswald and his team to present.
It's 2.065, I believe. Is it 5 or 7? You said 7.
I'm sorry, 2.065.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. Good afternoon, board members. Also joining in this presentation is Michelle Fleming, who will be who assisted with the development of this policy with a number of other staff members, including Chief Kitsero. At last week's board meeting, we had a discussion around visitor protocols and to come up with emergency policy, really to give stronger guidance to our schools around safety and health concerns when it comes to visitors. So this particular policy, I'll actually present my screen here. 2.065 would supersede all policy except the one you were just discussing that's currently in place as it relates to school board meetings. And it would apply to all everyone except for students and district employees as they come on a school campus, and greatly limit the flow and those who are able to report to a school campus. In addition, if this policy will be asked by the board members to take action this afternoon during the special meeting, and will take effect for 90 days as it is an emergency policy. So after we go through the presentation, if there's any changes like we did last week, if we could just mark those so that we could update those that you would take action on later. This policy, just as the others, will be provided to the public in a number of different forums, including our website, and announcing through our schools about the changes around who can come on our campus and for what reasons. Ms. Fleming now will go through the specifics of the guidelines when it comes to visitors.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Good afternoon, everybody. In these next few slides, I'll be presenting to you the district safety guidelines, visitor protocols, applicability, and duration as it pertains to policy 2.065. In this first slide here, while the district always values and relies on the participation of parents and guardians in our schools, at this time we are limiting that access and they will not be able to participate in those programs at this time. And this is in order to promote the health and safety of students, staff, and their families. And we are strongly encouraging any of our visitors to be pre-approved prior to coming on campus and ensure that they contact the principal or principal designee to have the necessary approval to be on campus. Next slide, please. Some of the district safety and guidelines I will speak about now were created to be in alignment with policy 3.82 and 5.326 that were discussed last week at the board workshop. All visitors must, this is the first layer we want guests to think about before even driving to the school, self-screen and temperature check prior to arrival, not have a temperature of 100.4 or higher, not have tested positive for COVID-19 in the last 14 days, and not had contact with someone positive in the last 10 days. Prior to entering district property, all visitors must report directly to the check-in location, sign in with regular protocols, and remain behind the plexiglass barrier and have pre-approved permission for the visit. They will have their temperature taken and will be asked to leave the district property if their temperature is above 100.4 and also answer the mandatory screening questions. Next slide. While physically on district property, all visitors must wear snugly fitting 3-ply facial coverings, and we made that adjustment last week on the other policies. Comply with directives not only from the policy, but also from the site-specific administrators. Abide by all social distancing guidelines and avoid congregating at all times. Next slide, please. Additional visitor protocols. When developing this policy, along with legal, we looked at school visitation policy 2.06 that is currently in board docs and reviewed some of the information there and added these items to this particular protocol. So any visitor who enters district property without purpose is subject to trespassing. Also, political activities are prohibited at this time and always, with the exception of a recognized group that has pre-approval as well. We thought this is very important as we are up on an election year and there's voting happening in the schools. Next slide, please. And we have additional visitor protocols where basically any visitor who comes onto campus, this is in the typical situation as well for school visitation, does not have unrestricted access there to remain in approved areas only. The school district does reserve the right to deny entry to any individual when there is reason to believe that the individual does not belong there or that there will be detrimental to the student learning, health, and safety. And also the district reserves the right to exclude anyone from the facility for a time period after if they have broken any of these protocols. And failure by any visitors to abide by the sections of this policy will result in immediate removal from the school campus or district facility. Next slide. The provisions of this policy supersede the provisions of any other board policy relating to these matters, with the exception of policy 1.03, and that was just discussed, and any policies that must be followed as required by federal or state law. And next slide. The duration upon adoption of this policy, this is a 90-day policy. The superintendent does have the right to revoke or rescind portions of this policy, and this will become effective upon its emergency adoption. And the policy shall end 90 days unless further extended by vote of the school board. And the last slide were some of our resources. We did look at the guidance for K-12 administrators from the CDC, along with the Florida Health COVID-19 response and District Policy 2.06 as a reference for today's presentation. So we'll open it up for discussion.
Ms. Fleming, will the questions, the mandatory questions in the policy on line 59, will it be the same ones that we just discussed? They're going to be consistent everywhere, right? Same questions?
I believe so. I'm going to defer to Chief Kitzero. We are working with school police at this time to develop those. So Chief, if you wanted to add anything there.
Thank you,
Don't ask him what the questions are. Just don't ask him.
Mr. Chairman, I did find the questions, and I can go over those with you right now if you would like me to.
Yes, sir. Would you, let the board members know what those questions are, please?
Okay, so upon entry, first thing we do is we establish identification. So first name, last name. In case of employee, we want to know your employee identification number. And then these are the general questions that we ask. Do you have a cough? Do you have any shortness of breath? Now in some of these locations and coming into schools, we'll have the ability to check temperature, but if we don't have the ability, we'll ask, do you have a fever? And a follow-up to that is what is your current body temperature? And then we ask, have you traveled outside the country in the last 14 days? Have you been in close contact with someone with COVID-19 or is being evaluated for COVID-19? And then we also ask, have you washed your hands or used alcohol-based hand sanitizer before entering the facility? In those situations where we don't have the hand sanitizer present, typically we have hand sanitizer for them to wash their hands. And then based on that, the answers to those questions, access is either granted or denied. And if we deny access, we generally will refer back to one of those questions to make sure we confirm why access was not granted.
Board member questions? Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. Do we have something in place with this policy for after-school pickup when parents are actually picking up their children? How does that work as it relates to this policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are currently, Ms. Kwana Howell is working with Dr. Sheffield on protocols of what's parent pickup will look like. So normal pickup, what is in the policy, normal arrival and pickup does not apply to this policy. So I'm driving through the parent pickup line and that doesn't apply to this particular policy. And as far as the protocol for pickup, we're not going to have those parents just come right on campus. We're working through that process right now.
Go ahead, Mrs. Andrews. Mrs. Andrews, your microphone went off.
We have quite a few vendors that deliver to our schools. How does this policy relate to those folks as they come into our campus?
It applies to vendors and contractors.
Many of them come in through the back way, so how does it work?
Yes, so they're going to have to come into the check-in area and not come into the back area. They're going to have to check in.
Ms. Andrews and the board, let me add, most of our vendors are on contracts where we know that they are. So once the board approves this, then protocols will be sent to all of our vendors to let them know of our new procedures. So they will have this information, and then as things happen, as they start coming on campus, we will then inform them. For those who may not have got the information at the work site, we're going to work through that and teach people what the new protocols are, but the schools will make sure that a lot of those backdoor entrances are closed, and we'll be working to condition and basically help people understand what the new protocols are. But for the vendors that we know, we will get this information to them prior to their delivery of items to our schools and campuses.
Any other questions? Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. Just two things. First, those standardized questions, they're not written in stone yet, are they? Okay, so my point is I would like them to be presented possibly to the Health Advisory Committee. I have no hard objection to them. They just don't seem to align with any recommendations that I've read. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm gonna just ask for them, for us to consider the possibility of tweaking them. That's it. And then my second thing is the pre-approvals. So like the pre-approvals for parents, is that a visit by visit pre-approval? Because I didn't understand that.
Yes, that would be if, let's say I have an ESE, maybe it's a special education meeting, that would be pre-approved, and those parents would be permitted to come on campus, as well as potential if they're bringing anyone with them. So
right.
If there's a
but it
parent,
would just be for that period of time.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And Dr. Robinson, to your questions about the questions, so we've been using them all summer. So we will not stop that process, but absolutely, as with everything that we're doing, as they evolve, and as we kind of get our Health Advisory Committee reorganized for our transition, then we can revisit these things regularly to see if it's the most accurate and up-to-date information. So absolutely, we will put that in our protocol list.
And Dr. Robinson, one follow-up to that too. Those are the questions that we were advised that the CDC wanted us to use as guidelines. So if those things are changed and stuff, we'll take a look at that.
Mrs. Rico, should there be any kind of qualifier on that line to allow for changes, or is it just assumed that they could be changed?
I think that, and I'm not seeing it right off the bat here, but I believe that what we were going to do with all of these policies is link the current, actual questions or, those things that are best practices that are evolving on a daily basis. So I think that's how that was supposed to be handled, and I'm not seeing it right in the.
If I may, when we work with Ms. Morgan, she did suggest that we leave it generic so that if they do change or evolved, the language was loose to allow for that.
So that was my concern. I mean, if somebody knows what the questions are today, that they're going to maybe object to other questions. Maybe you could say answer mandatory screening questions as from time to time by the superintendent.
Right. I do think that we should look at making this the same as some of the other policies like this, where we linked the information to, a place that it lives in the district on our website. And so that as these things change, because we know that they will, that there'll be a snapshot for the application to that particular individual when, an issue comes up, and that people will be notified of what the current questions or protocols might be.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Rico. Any other questions by the board? Go ahead, Mrs. Andrews.
And maybe this is coming, but as we get back into brick and mortar and we're having evening activities with people coming and going from our campuses, how will that work?
As of right now, with this policy, they would not be coming on campus unless it's some type of pre-approval activity by the principal.
So Mr. Oswald, which happens all the time, especially in elementary school, somebody forgot their lunch and mom's bringing it. She would have to call the school first and get approval by the principal to come onto the campus to drop off lunch. Is that the way this would work?
Yes, they would have to call, get approval, and then we could work to go out to the actual car. They would never need, we talked about this actually in preparation, that someone from the district employee could just go out to the vehicle and get the lunch from the parent, and they would need to leave their car.
Okay, so the parents will have to call the school in advance. We need to make sure that information gets out to the parents, because it happens, as we all know, every day in almost all of our schools, especially the elementary schools. Somebody forgot a book or something, mom is
Mr. Barbieri, and then if I can add, remember, a lot of our schools have security personnel and other staff outside. And so what I have experienced both today and going to my son's school, a lot of the schools are setting up a security station, where they will call inside of the building to let them know what that visitor wants. And so in my case today, the gentleman from the security team called the school, and then someone met me at the front door with the things that I needed. So if you think about a lot of our Parkland protocols, especially when we put those people out there, that's how we'll be able to manage that. And the school's already doing a good job at that, sir.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? I think that takes us to your third workshop by Mr. Burke, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. FY21 Capital Plan Workshop. I now turn it over to our distinguished gentleman, Mr. Mike Burke, and his great team. I see Leanne is here, so I'm really excited because she gives us the real stuff.
Yes, good afternoon. Every now and then, I think you might like to hear something from us nice and easy. But you see, we never, ever do anything nice and easy. We always do things nice and rough. Of course, that's the quote from the great Tina Turner, and it's becoming my mantra as of late. So I got to say, Miss Evans had a nice presentation. She's got the capital budgets, 10-year plan balanced, and then I kind of messed it up, and I'm going to do the rough part on the front end of this presentation. Leanne, if you'll jump ahead, we got some news on August 14th, and some of our concerns about the state budget and potential mid-year cuts seem to be coming to fruition. The budget the legislature approved back in March, and then the governor, of course, signed that in July. It was based on revenue projections that were done in January, well before COVID-19. So on August 14th, the state economists, EDR, they updated all the state's budget forecasts, and that's going to be the basis. Normally, that would just be the basis to kick off deliberations for FY22, the following school year. But I think with the severity of the reductions in the revenue, they're going to be forced to revisit their FY21 budget, and they've hinted that may occur after the legislature reorganizes in November after the elections. So you may have read some reports, that this could have been worse. That's true, but what we're left with is still substantial. They're looking at, so they ended last year, FY20, short about $1.9 billion. So that's going to eat into probably their $4 billion in reserve. And then when they look at the current year we're in, the school year we're getting ready to start, they're short $3.4 billion, or nearly 10% of the state general revenue. And the state's budget has different funds and trust funds and all that. When we look at education, we really have to focus on the general revenue. That's what supports us. That's what the sales tax revenue is pumping into, and that's what flows out to the FEFP. So, when the state's down almost 10%, and you think how education's funded in our state, where it's pretty much, roughly half sales tax and half local property taxes, the impact to us will be less than what the state's feeling, but even half of 10% is huge dollars for our district. And this is not expected to kind of be cured overnight. The state economists have also further reduced revenues in FY22. So we're looking at reduced revenue for the next 2 years. In 22, they had it going down $2 billion, or 5.6% of the state's 5.6% of the state's general revenue. And there's a very important footnote on this forecast, and it deals with the CARES Act money at the state level. The state's got over $5 billion in CARES Act money they haven't spent yet, and they are trying to get flexibility out of the federal government to use that money to backfill lost revenue. And to date, that has not been approved, and that's not a provision. But so that I guess that lobbying will continue, but if that should fail, then these numbers just got a whole lot worse. And I think that's why you see the state down just say 10% instead of 20% in this upcoming year. Because when we look at the monthly sales tax collections, they're running down 20% or more from when things really started getting bad in April and through June. So we also know the governor has asked all state agencies to perform an exercise of reducing their budgets by 8.5%. That includes the Department of Education. That includes the FEFP. And, I've just got a quote from Senator Galvano, because he's been kind of taking the lead on the legislature's behalf of any budget communications. And, he did share, it wasn't as dire as it could have been, but that these results will likely, they'll be, revisited after the November reorganization to see if they need to take any action. So I think that's kind of a hint. Chief Kitchell would say that's probably a clue, but that's looking like more and more like we will have a special session mid-year. And if we move to the next slide, I'll try to just explain what I think this may mean for our school district. And these are estimates. We don't know exactly what the legislature could do. Theoretically, they could say we're going to raise taxes, but in Florida, that's probably not likely. More likely is that they're going to have to make reductions. And if you just look at education as a share of the general revenue, the FEFP is about 37%. So what we've done is said, okay, if the state's down $3.4 billion in FY21, what's that going to do to the FEFP? And the FEFP would fall about $1.3 billion. And then we say, okay, what's that going to do to Palm Beach County? And we're about 7% of that. And our estimates, we lose about $91 million. and that could hit us this year, mid-year, and then you're kind of forced to deal with a mid-year budget reduction, and that's huge. We've been working throughout this budget development process to put a reserve aside because we knew this was a concern, and we know we have all these additional costs with COVID, and we've got over $40 million in our reserve, which is wise and it's good, but it may not be enough. Is my point. So we need to. My message really today is we need to hold on to every dollar we can. If you look out for FY22, if that forecast holds true from EDR, we could lose another $53 million. So you're looking at potentially losing about $144 million over a 2-year span. And if you compare that back to the Great Recession, look back at FY08, FY09, when we really got hit the brunt of the start of the Great Recession, we lost just over $100 million in those 2 years. So we could actually exceed that with this recession and lose over 145 million in 2 years. So that's the rough part of this presentation. We are monitoring the situation very closely. Like I said, we need to hang on to every dollar we can. I believe that some type of adjustment and cuts is imminent. Hopefully the legislature can try to do things to mitigate the impact to K-12 education, but it's going to be hard for them because we're 37% of that budget. The other thing they could do is, they could tap their reserves to try to cover some of this. But, they face the same pressure we do with credit rating agencies, and they've got debt. And it's really not wise to wipe out your reserves on the front end of a recession when you don't know how long you might be dealing with this. And, you have to have really kind of a viable plan. Both the state and our district have to have a balanced budget each year. So we're kind of obligated to get budgets balanced. It's not like the federal government where they can, print some more money and push this off for a later day. So we will be feeling the impact probably here in a matter of months, not years. And, so anyway, that's kind of the bad news. I don't think I'm surprising anybody because we've been talking about this, but we just wanted to give you that update. And of course, we'll be back in September for final budget adoption. At this point, we're going to move to the more pleasant side of the presentation where Ms. Evans has always done a great job to corral our sizable capital plan. And the board earlier, as part of the tentative budget, you approved the first year of that 10-year plan, and we workshopped that prior to the vote. Now Ms. Evans is going to kind of just show you how that plays out for the next 10 years, at least at this point. So Ms. Evans, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all. I'm going to give you a brief sales tax update. I know you've been seeing this along with what Mr. Burke has been providing for the general fund, but for the sales tax, prior to the pandemic, we were humming along with sales tax revenues averaging 115% of projections. Those are coming down, and we've talked about this before. You've seen previous updates. I just wanted to give you a brief update and remember, we expected to receive $1.35 billion. 51 million was set aside in a reserve, and there's still 47 million in that reserve that is not encumbered. It's set aside for things like this. Whenever anyone asks, can we pull that money from the reserve? And I would say there's no guarantee we're going to get all the money we expected. That's what this reserve is there for. So we still have 47 million there. The current projected shortfalls range anywhere from 12 million to 36 million, all within the amount that's currently in that reserve. So when any department comes in and they've got budget increases, I'm telling them you've got to have a budget cut somewhere else to offset it because we don't want to touch that reserve until we have a better idea of where the sales tax will end up. We are expected to receive the revenue for June tomorrow. I just got those numbers. And we're going to be, instead of 115%, we're at about 113.7%. So that overall number is coming down as we expected, and we'll continue to track that. We provide updates with a lot of granular detail to both ISOC and the Finance Committee. So they're reviewing this as we receive it. And I share it with Mr. Burke, and he passes it along to the superintendent and senior staff. So we're paying a lot of attention to these numbers as well. Now, the capital plan, first of all, let me tell you, this presentation is going to look eerily familiar to what I showed you the last time I was before you. All we've really done is update it. So instead of showing just FY21, it's now all the way out to FY30. So the numbers are a lot bigger, but the basic message is the same. So we've updated it with the information we have to date. I already know there's some minor changes coming prior to adoption in September. part of what we do this time of year is not only balancing the budget, closing the year, and running the ISOC reports. And the ISOC reports are set up as a way to double check to make sure everything is staying in sync. And we found some little things. We've got projects that are off by 28 cents, and we're trying to fix those. So lots of little things. We'll have all those adjustments before you see it for final adoption in September. This includes everything that we have known to date. We work with all the departments. I spend a tremendous amount of time with the facilities department and IT, trying to understand where they're going and what they're going to need over the next 10 years. So as we mentioned earlier, the significant increases are computers. We had planned to get there over the 10-year window. Now we did it all in year one. So the actual budget for computers didn't change that much. It just got moved up. And we have added in money to cover regular replacements. We're set on a 5-year replacement cycle. We've also added some money in for building envelope projects. We've advanced some money these are minor roof replacements and repairs. These aren't necessarily major projects, but we know that there's some roof work that needs to be done. This slide is exactly the same as what you saw last time. I wanted to make sure I showed you all the construction projects. Nothing has changed since we met the last time. But this is the list of all the projects. And I see a hand raised. Ms. Brill?
Sorry. So yes, I've got 2 issues on this page. The last time this was presented, when I saw that the Sunset Palms Middle School was moved to August of 2023, I questioned it, and Mrs. Paul got back to me because my understanding was it was going to be August of 2022. She got back to me and said, yes, I don't know when it was changed, but it was changed. Originally, I was told that it was fully funded already and that it would be built for August 2022. When she followed back with me, I was told no, that it's going to be fully funded in 2021. So it's not funded yet. I have to tell you that it's finally caught the attention of Coba, and my constituents are very, very upset, in part because when I supported the closure of Odyssey Middle School and not the reconfiguration of the school, it was with the promise that that middle school was going to be built. We knew that it was going to cause overcrowding in our middle schools and that it was always going to be a temporary fix. So I'm just putting it out there. I know Dr. Fenoy is aware that Coba is not happy. It will probably be a topic brought up when he presents to them in December, but I'm just putting it out there. And then my other question, I don't remember seeing this before, but the West Delray area elementary school, the K-8, that's in my district, and every meeting that I attend in West Delray and West Boynton, all I hear is, when are we going to get a high school? So, I don't know how that high school in Lake Worth is going to alleviate the issues out in this area. So my question for you on this, I don't expect an answer right now on Sunset Palms Middle School, but how did we decide that we needed a K-8 elementary school in West Delray?
I'd actually ask if Ms. Paul could answer. Her staff provides the list of the projects.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Again, this is Wanda Paul. Ms. Brill, if I may talk to you about Double P. I know that's not what you asked, but on Double P, you recall that we had a lot of issues with trying to get approval through DOE to actually build Double P. This is a more realistic timeline. If we finish earlier, definitely we'll let Coba know. But right now, this is the pace we think we're on. I had my team also reach out to Coba to make them aware, based on the conversation that you and I had also, that to be more realistic, it would be 2023. But again, I understand the consternation on this. But again, we'll get it done as fast as we can, without a doubt. Yes, ma'am.
Just to be clear, the issue with DOE was resolved before we put this on the schedule.
Right.
So it wasn't because we had an issue with DOE that we changed it to 2023. And I was just asked to join the Growth Management Committee for Coba. And so it was just this past weekend, Saturday, that again became a big issue for them. And I did see an email that was sent basically with the same information I gave them. I forwarded your earlier information. But I do appreciate some attention being given if there's an opportunity to push it up, because the fear in this community is that we closed a middle school that could have been reconfigured, that could have served the needs of this community. We shut it down, a beautiful building, and now, everybody's sitting in limbo.
And Ms. Brill, as you know, we've presented before Cobra before, and myself and my team would be happy to go with you in the future to explain some of the challenges we've had. But again, as I said before, if there's any way we can accelerate it, we definitely will. But I want to be realistic in terms of the current market and what we're dealing with to give you an achievable date. In regards to the Del Rey area elementary school, or K-8, again, I think that's based on our planning and governmental department, intergovernmental department, and I will be pleased to provide you that data that created this school, and let you know kind of what we're looking at. Is pushed out all the way to 2023. As you know, things change, and so I would be happy to meet with you and with my team also to talk about this specific school.
Go ahead, Ms. Brill.
So two things. Then is this a typo that it's 2023 and not 2030?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 2030. I'm stuck on 2023 from P. So it's 2030.
Right. So somewhere in between, there needs to be a discussion about high schools, and maybe, just maybe, when we do build that middle school, Sunset Palms Middle, or whatever we're going to call it, we do hope that there might be a charter school with a campus that might close, that provide us with a small high school facility. But my concern is, as of today, which is, of course, is 10 years earlier, there is a K-8 in the West Del Rey area. It's a charter school, dual language, and they're having difficulty filling the seats. So, so that's my concern, is we have a K-8 there that's having difficulty filling its seats. I don't know what the capacity is right now with Hidden Oaks, which is really north and east of us, but there just doesn't seem a lot of desire from the families out in this area for a K-8. So I'm just making you aware of that.
Well, I definitely appreciate it, and we will work with you in collaboration on this. Again, I'd be happy to meet with you as well as Cobra to have this conversation and keep them in the loop. So thank you very much.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. I asked this question the last time, and thank you, Mr. Burke, for giving me an answer. But for those three transportation facilities, the North, the South, and the West Central, what's the date for that modernization? When will that take place for those three?
I think we're in development now. Give me just a minute. I can get that to you. We just had a update to Cork, so I can get that to you, Ms. Andrews.
Okay, let me just follow up. Follow up. Because I'm just really concerned that the far west facility and the Belglade that services Belglade, South Bay, Pahokee, and Canal Point has been left off the list. And I know you said that facility was better than the other three. All of them are in bad shape. And I do appreciate Mr. Burke saying that something's going to happen in 2024 for that facility out in the far west region. But something has to happen before then. And all of the facilities, things need to be looked at. When I look at the restroom facilities, safety issues, it's just really very demeaning and poor and safety conditions as it relates to the employees that really take care of our children on buses and in transportation. So 2024 is a long time. Any improvement for any of these facilities before this modernization, when we start looking at the heat? Many of the drivers and employees are sitting out under the pavilions that are old and beat up and broke down, and they're hot. The fans don't work. I've been asking for help, especially out there at the far west and the central region, the one that I work with so much, the West Central. So something needs to happen. And why did we just not consider the far west region. It's really an equity issue for me, and it seems like they were just left behind. So if somebody can help me with that.
So, Ms. Andrews, in regards to the Belvedere and the South Transportation facilities, it is our intent to advertise those between August and September of this year. So one of the things that we're doing is, as you know, building a brand new facility, West Central, the Belvedere facility. So we expect to have quite a few buses that will run out of there and take some of the load off of the West facility. But in regards to maintenance related issues on the West facility, we definitely will take a look at that and see what we can do within our budget to improve the quality of that facility.
One more. All right. Yes, because I don't see Inlet Grove on here anywhere. And, you know, the last time we had this discussion, it kind of came to me that I see nowhere. I'm happy for what we've done for South Tech, but is there anything that's going to happen for Inlet Grove?
Yes, we're about to enter those conversations right now. We're looking at kind of what we have in the pipeline. And I've talked to Ms. Emma Banks in terms of, you know, getting that process started. Right now, we do have a number of projects that we're working on, but we plan to start that process with Inlet Grove shortly.
Mrs. Paul, if I can ask you a question. South Intensive Modular Edition, I assume those modulars are going over to the old South Tech where South Intensive is moving into, yes?
Yeah, we're good to go on that. We're setting up security cameras now. We've done some maintenance on the buildings to kind of refresh them and so forth. So we will be ready to start school at South Intensive at the old South Tech site.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the board members? Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Ms. Evans about the two demo projects that were taken off the list. Does that save a significant amount of money, and did that go back into the accounts, or is that just a very small number?
I can answer part of it, and I'm sure Ms. Paul will add to it. These two projects were both canceled, and there was about $1.9 million left in each one of them. And that went back into capital contingency, and it was used to help balance the budget, the FY21 budget.
Mr. Shaw?
So in regards to OGO, that was conveyed to the city of Belgrade, and so it's now their property. And again, you know, as soon as money becomes available, Ms. Evans is going to sweep it. So that's just how we do it. In terms of Old Pomosa, the city of Delray did express interest in possibly purchasing it. Right now, it's on hold. But you know, we still own it, and we're still required to maintain it.
Wonderful, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. I have two questions, one for Ms. Evans and the other one for Mrs. Paul. For Mrs. Evans, what is the opportunity? What are the opportunities that we have coming up in, let's say, the next 2 or 3 years related to refinancing some of our debt? And how could that be to our advantage as if we look at some real serious budget issues? We haven't done any for a while, and I haven't heard about any. So can you give us a real quick update on that opportunity? And for Mrs. Paul, what is the status of us using the PPP projects as a way to expedite some of this construction and get some projects done without having to make a big investment?
So I'll go first on that, Ms. Evans, if you don't mind. So we've had a number of people approach us on doing PP projects and so forth. And Ms. Evans and her team and Mr. Burke have been so just remarkable in getting really low interest rates for us that they really can't beat that deal that Ms. Evans and the team provide. So I've listened to countless presentations from different members that, you know, have a deal for us, but we find overall that our interest rates are pretty good. Now I'll let Ms. Evans kind of fill in the rest of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Whenever we've looked at the public-private partnership, the first question I always ask is their borrowing rate. And typically they're borrowing at a taxable rate where we can borrow at a tax-exempt rate. And we do have a good credit rating, and that helps us. Plus, we're well known in the market. So typically when we're issuing debt, we get very good response. And when we talk to those companies that are doing the public-private partnerships, so far they've not been able to come close to the interest rates that we can do. So the borrowing is almost always easier if we do it ourselves. Then you can always look at whether or not they can build it faster, but quite frankly, we're bidding out construction projects, and that's exactly what the Triple P projects would do as well. So it's a lot of times for small entities that don't have access to the capital markets, these make more sense. They typically are set up for like dormitories or buildings or roadways that generate revenues. Then it pays for itself. Our schools don't pay for themselves. So it doesn't really fit in the box. There's a lot of people out there trying to create a new box that we could fit into, and they haven't quite come up with one yet, but they're still working. And there's lots of people out there trying to find better ways to build our schools. Regarding refundings, as you know, about 2 years ago, there were some major tax reforms, and they eliminated the ability to do advance refundings of debt issues. So after the last recession, we went through a period of time where we didn't enter any debt. It didn't issue any new debt. And you can only refund them when the debt issue hits at least 10 years along. So we've got this little window of time where there's not really anything out there that's eligible to refinance, unless we choose to issue at a taxable rate. And honestly, we've looked at that a couple of times. With interest rates so very low, that might be an option. I get proposals on a regular basis. We review them with our advisors. If something makes sense, we'll bring it into the finance committee and to the board, of course. I don't think there's anything out there today, but that doesn't mean an investment banker is not listening and going to send me something tomorrow. So they're incentivized. Whichever one of the members of our investment banking team brings us a good proposal, they get to lead that refunding. So they pay a lot of attention to it. So there's a bit of an incentive there. So if there's something that makes sense, they're going to get it to me.
Any other questions from the board?
Glad I'm not frozen. I just want to reiterate Mrs. Andrews' comment about Inlet Grove. I can't fathom there's nothing here through 2030. So we definitely need a conversation. Thank you.
I'd like to just add a little bit on Inlet Grove. What you don't see, and we're going to get to a slide, it's 2 slides away, when we talk about other facilities projects. And there's a big one that is facility renewal projects. That's all the sales tax money. That's where Inlet Grove is. So it's just not on this page because it's not a separately standing new construction project. So there is money we actually call it possible critical needs at Inlet Grove because we didn't know what we needed to do, if anything. But there is money available that could be used. And Ms. Paul is going to lead that work to determine what needs to happen there.
Okay, thank you. And I guarantee you there's stuff to do.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move ahead. This slide looks exactly like you saw it last time. This is just showing the debt service. The amount is increased because this is over the 10-year window. And I'll always point out these lines. This red line is 50% of the 1.5 mil. The green line is 50% of 2 mil. That's where we used to be at. And when the legislature changed the law and reduced your taxing authority, it reduced our ability to borrow. It took us almost 10 years to get back to the point that we could borrow again. And we just did a COPS issue back in April. There's another one planned for sometime during FY22 to finance the construction of O and O5C and a couple of other modernizations. So there's four COPS issues planned over the 10-year window. We also have one short-term lease that we plan to do that will pick up the rest of the chillers that need to be replaced throughout the district. We've been financing them over a 5-year window. So the last batch of those will be done this year. So here's the other facility project. It's 1.8 billion. That's double what you saw on the other slide for the construction projects. The facility renewal is funded with the sales tax proceeds. There is a specific list of projects and amount of money for each school. So we're working through those. The facilities team is doing a great job at trying to get those done. In fact, they reach out to me and say, can we speed them up? And the problem we have is our taxes over a 10-year window. I can't spend money that's coming in year 10 now. So we could borrow some, we are borrowing some of it. We could borrow to some extent, but no one's going to loan us money for what might come in year 10, especially when you've got a major economic recession going on. So they are spread out over the 10-year window. Other facility projects, that's the basic ongoing maintenance that happens at our schools. And there's a lot of that they're doing. Site acquisition. And I wanted to point out, I think I mentioned this earlier, we did the improvements for Sable Palm and South Intensive. So on the sales tax referendum, we indicated $500,000 a year was plugged into site acquisition that would be used to lease space specifically for those schools to put them in a temporary facility. That's not needed. So that has been pulled out of those projects. We don't need that. It went in to help balance the budget this year. That is an item that'll be going to ISOC on Friday, but that was not sales tax money. But it was on the referendum project list. So we don't need to spend that. So that's $5 million over the 10-year window. Security and transportation, and then other equipment. So the security projects at $67.6 million. That's continuing all the work that's going on. That includes one of the grants, and there are 2 more grants pending. So that number will most likely increase some. School buses, other support vehicles, that's $226 million. So that's all the school buses that we're replacing with sales tax for now. And eventually, once we get to year 10 of the sales tax, we switch over to using other funds to pay for buses. And then equipment, that includes furniture and equipment replacement, musical instruments, and maintenance of equipment. Education technology is all the flat panels and the things that go along with those. Most of that is funded from the sales tax. So that is technology going directly in the classroom. It is not used to buy laptops. We can't use sales tax money to buy laptops. It's not eligible, but we can buy those big flat panels that are in the classroom that all the teachers are using. And then the technology area, this has increased, especially for FY21, because we fully funded that one-to-one initiative. So lots of computers have been ordered. We're hoping to get them in sooner rather than later. They're on order. We're just waiting for them to arrive. We've also adjusted some of the cyber and network security items, infrastructure projects, things that includes all the items needed to support the technology needs of the students and staff. Other capital items. I'm sorry, was there a question?
When you talked about the issue of buying the computers, I don't know how many years ago, but a few years ago, we had some legislative interest in trying to change that law to allow that. Is that an issue that we might want to reconsider and putting on our platform for this year to be able to use some of those dollars for our computers?
We actually tried to do that when we were buying the flat panels. The language we proposed, there is 2 different types of sales tax. One is the local government infrastructure, which does not have technology in it. And then there's the school sales tax, which would be just us, not partnering with the county and the cities. You can buy technology if it's the school tax. We tried to get the language replicated for both. It's awkward. Those 2 statutes are very different. For instance, you can buy school buses from the local government infrastructure tax. You can't buy it when you're doing the school tax. So it doesn't really make sense, but that's what's in law. And we've tried a couple of times to get those updated and haven't been successful. I'm sure school districts throughout the state would cheer if we could get that changed.
Was it something that had resistance, or was it just not a lot of attention paid to the issue?
I don't know the details. I know Mr. LaFace worked on it. He was great at getting it set up so we could do the flat panels. I had provided as a sample the language from the other statute that would allow all technology to be purchased. And the answer I got was there was really no appetite to do that, but they would help us out. And they gave us very specific language to add in that is specifically to those flat panels. It doesn't allow for any other computers. It has to be deemed infrastructure. So servers and routers that make the system work are eligible, but buying computers that kids might use, that's not considered infrastructure.
Right. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, property and flood insurance, that we have increased the budget. So it's going from 10 million a year to 12 million a year based on current market conditions. We work with our risk management team, Diane Howard and her shop, to make sure we're updating these numbers as needed on an annual basis. The reserves, every time I get in front of you, I tell you, don't get too excited about these reserves. They include the sales tax reserve, which may or may not really happen. It also includes money that's budgeted in year 9 and 10. So the revenue projections are not necessarily super reliable when you get to years 9 and 10. And that's where most of the reserves are. We do have some reserves currently, but this is over a 10-year window. And what we see in 10 years is going to look very different than what you're looking at today for year 2030. And then charter schools, it's 119 million. This is a charter school capital outlay tax. It's charter school capital outlay money. For FY21, it was funded from the state. For years 22 through 30, we've got it in the budget that we're paying for it. The law says that if the state's not able to fund it, that the districts would be required to. That very well could happen next year. That when the state's dealing with very large budget shortfalls, that could be something that they could come back and say that's not something that they can do. So currently we have it in the budget as if we're paying for it. And every year we do the budget and I find out the state's funding it, it's 10 million or 12 million that can go back to fund something else. So it's one of those things we're keeping an eye on. So with this, the capital plan is basically complete. There are some slight differences you'll see before we get to adoption. I'll be happy to break those out when we do that, when I provide that to you for September 9th. The future concerns. I always say the sales tax revenue is dedicated to very specific projects that can't be used for anything else other than what we have on that project list. Legislative changes such as changes to student station costs, DOE approval of projects is not required right now, but that could come back into play. Funding for charter schools, those could all impact capital plan as we move forward in time. We're concerned about property values. They stayed steady for this year. They went up a little bit. There's some concern about what's going to happen in the marketplace. Just as EDR came out with some projections on the operating side, they've come up with some projections for the capital side that do show a reduction. But they don't talk to our local property appraiser, and it really changes from one county to the next. So that's something we're also going to keep an eye on. We may see a reduction in property values. So far, home values appear to be holding their value. I think everyone's more concerned about commercial properties. And if you have large buildings where more and more people are working from home as opposed to going to an office, that could change property values. So it's something that would directly impact the capital budget. Sales tax revenues, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Hopefully the shortfall lives within our reserves and we're in good shape, but it's something we'll continue to monitor. And there's always, we know, additional needs for maintenance. There's staff, the services, preventive maintenance. We want to do everything we can to avoid another shortfall in the future. So that's something that we're paying attention to. And finally, rising construction costs. I was hoping that would fall off the list, honestly, for this presentation, because with the recession, some projects drop off and all of a sudden government's the only game in town and prices come down. We haven't seen that happen yet. I think we're starting to see some of that, but some of the items they need to build schools, light fixtures and things like that, are made in China and we don't have them and the prices have gone up. So I think it's a real mixed bag there. But that rising construction costs are something we've been dealing with for the last couple of years. So we'll continue to monitor that as well. And with that, I would pause for any questions you might have.
If Ms. Paul's still here, I've got a question. Earlier you mentioned that the chillers were taken care of or will be taken care of. Have we fixed the problem at Olympic Heights High School with the air conditioning system?
We have done a lot of work at Olympic Heights. I know that. I have not. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we've done a lot of work at Olympic Heights. I think So far, we are in good shape. I don't believe we have replaced the chillers because of their age, but we are monitoring the system. We have replaced a lot of parts at Olympic Heights. We've had a lot of service from the manufacturer there. We will continue to monitor that school. I have not had a history of issues there over this past summer as we've done our preventive maintenance and everything, but we will continue to closely monitor them as we have previously.
Okay, one more question before I see Mrs. Andrews' hand up. I have another question. Back to the middle school next to Sunset Palms. Mrs. Paul, you said that was going to, 2023 was the time it was going to be funded, but didn't we already run a contract on that school?
2023 completion.
Okay, contracts, we already approved the contract for that school to be built.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Mrs. Andrews, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Just to follow up on Pahokee Middle High, as you know, the air conditioning system and the ventilation quality of air has been a problem for years. And now that we've been out for all these months, I just would want to make sure that that school is really at the top of your list. When we looked at some of those systems back in some of those classrooms, Ms. Paul, you know where I'm talking about,
yes,
as well as the air conditioning system itself. I just really don't want to wake up and we're back to brick and mortar and the children are in that building and we recognize the issues before we left, before the pandemic.
As you know, Ms. Andrews, we put a new roof on there. We repaired the classrooms where we had those issues. And I mean, basically we did a lot of repairs on Pahokee Middle High. But as you understand, and I understand, there's still more work to do. And so we're working through the list to try to put the kids in a better situation. So that's high on my list also.
Yes, basically for that air and the ventilation, that's really, really important for somebody to check it out.
Yes, and as I talk about, I have an upcoming update to the board, and I'll talk about some of that in terms of changing filters more frequently and upgrading the Merv level on some of our filters.
Mr. Paul, have we fixed the roof leaks at that high school?
We put a new roof on it.
Okay, so the mold that they had in some of those classrooms is not repeating, correct?
I sincerely hope it's a new roof on it.
Okay, great.
But again, we monitor the school and we have a good relationship with the principal, Mr. Denard there. And so we are very in touch with what's happening there.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. I have a number of questions. So let me start with the easiest one. Are we looking to lease small buses or mini buses to help us meet the needs of students?
So if you're referring to social distancing on the buses, no, I'm not sure in what context.
Yeah, it predates that. So, just for us to address the needs, say, for some students with IEPs, as well as to help make our choice program work better.
So in regards to NC students, we do have contracts that with several transportation entities that we already use to transport our ESE students. So we work very closely with them.
Okay. All right. So then let me move on. So why was Pine Grove was delayed in the plan or postponed in the plan?
We have a number of projects that are already in the pipeline that we're working on. And we just had to be reasonable in terms of what we're able to do and have the capacity to do. So I did request to move it back so that we can focus on some of the other projects and bigger projects that we have at this time. But we still monitor Pine Grove and make sure that that it is functional. It's on the list to do.
And so which projects did you find were more important than Pine Grove?
Well, we have Grove Park right now that we have to get done because of the condition of its infrastructure. So that's one of them that I can point to, that we have to make sure that we get it done as fast as we can. And so again, you know, we thought we could be able to maintain Pine Grove and focus on the ones that we are concerned with catastrophic failures, and that would be Grove Park.
Okay, well, I would not disagree with that characterization of Grove Park. I from my visits at Pine Grove, they're pretty close. So
yeah, well, so
the other,
yeah, I'm sorry. So particularly to Grove Park, which I can definitely speak to, the HVAC system is really in bad shape. The plumbing, you know, and so you're aware of this because you're in touch and stuff. So that's one that I had to race to get. And so unfortunately we couldn't do everything we wanted to do. And we had to look at the projects that, you know, that were already in the pipeline and get those finished up. So we're trying to get to Pine Grove as soon as we can. But, you know, again, you know, we have certain limitations. My team, you know, I have to let them sleep eventually. So, but
well,
we'll keep in touch. We'll keep in touch with Pine Grove to make sure that we're able to maintain the building until we get to it.
Okay, thank you. So before I get to a more difficult question, let me ask, so when is Inlet Grove funded? Did I hear somebody say 2030? Because that certainly wasn't anywhere.
No, that's not correct.
Close.
That's not correct. No. I sincerely like working in this district, so I would not ever tell you that we're going to push that project out to 2030. Leanne, do you have the
when is it funded?
I do. There's planning money in the budget now, and the construction money will come in 2022.
Okay, so that means we need to get the planning, right?
Well, part of that is starting that conversation, which I mentioned earlier. And so that's how we start with the planning money, and then when it's fully funded, we can go out for the architect, the construction company, and so forth.
Okay, so let me just, my colleagues would just bear with me because I haven't asked questions along the way. There's several projects that just tend to cause me to feel a bit cantankerous, and this is one of them, right? And I mean, and I know that this is a multiple departments need to come together to make this happen. I'm just going to ask here and now and publicly that you guys get together and make this thing happen. I mean, I know all these steps that need to happen, and I think I've been talking to various staff for at least 2 years about this. And so I'm kind of frustrated with the kicking the can down the road. So that takes me to a different question. So, Mrs. Paul, do you need more help? Because it feels like we have too much work going on with too much complexity for the staffing that we have. And I don't know what AECOM is doing. I mean, I'm sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, or somebody would have told us, but it just seems like I thought that we put enough human power there to make this plan work, but it feels like it's not happening. So can you give me some feedback on that?
I mean, the reality, Dr. Robinson, and again, I talk to Ms. Emma Banks weekly on Inlet Grove. We talk about that quite a bit in terms of when we're going to start. And I assure you, we will get into those conversations fairly soon. But in terms of the cadence of the work, you in your questions, you asked, kind of which projects have we been accelerated on, and you kind of see some of that work. In addition, we're also doing a lot of facility renewal work. So all of our projects are not just new construction, which is really fun to see these projects develop and you have a brand new building. But a lot of our work is messy and infrastructure work and it's, chiller replacements and roofs and that kind of stuff. So when you look at it, the way the referendum was set up, most of the work is in that facility renewal work and not the replacement of or modernization of schools. So we have to make sure that we maintain that balance. Now, I would tell you that it is my goal to do all of the new construction and get that out of the way as soon as we can. So we do have several new buildings that we've been able to do. But again, the bulk of the dollars for this referendum are in facility renewals. And so, yes. Yes, ma'am.
So I add one thing. Dr. Robinson's question was about staff.
Yeah.
Let me be really clear. I have not given anybody any permission to add any more staff at all, considering that we may be reducing our staff in the near future. So we have never had a conversation around increasing the number of staff members. And as I understand it from my time in that team, and Mr. Burke might be able to help me with this, during the recession, we never really replenished the workforce that we let go from the last time on the maintenance side of the house. And so so through contracted services and what we have is really what we've been doing. So there has never been a conversation about adding substantial staff to the maintenance and that side. We've never had that conversation.
And part of that, Dr. Robinson, is that, and it predates my time, but part of that is to maintain a right balance so that when we get in economic hard times, we don't have to let people go. And so, I have a very dedicated staff, and AECOM has been a good partner thus far. So, again, unfortunately, we can't do yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ramble, but go ahead.
Well, listen, I'm not trying to ramble either, but I do understand that what you have been tasked to do is more complex than, whenever it was 15 years ago, when we seem to be building left and right all the time, right? And I get that this is more complex, right? But I'm kind of frustrated because, like it's been said, Inlet Grove is funded out of the facility renewal part, right?
Right, a couple of different ways.
Okay, and I'm glad to hear the timing is still there for planning now and construction monies allocated next. But it just, again, so what I'm really asking you, I know I'm pretty clear about the financial situation. What I'm asking you, Mrs. Paul, is in order to do what I'm gonna say but I suspect other board members would like for you to do, would you need more help? I mean, is that my reality? Are you telling me that I'm going to continue to see things kick down the road because the complexity is too much for the current staffing? That's what I'm asking you.
So again, Dr. Robinson, I don't think it's too much for the current I'm trying to answer your question. I don't think it's too much or too many projects for the current staffing, but I also think that it's important that we manage the money part of it to make sure we can't spend money we don't have. And so that's why we work in concert with Ms. Evans to make sure that we have a balanced approach to where the money sits and not just have it sitting there and we know that we're not going to get to it. You know what I mean? So for instance, if I would have put Inlet Grove earlier, then I know with the level of projects we have, the money would be sitting there, but we wouldn't get to it. So I think that I understand your frustration, and we will continue to work with you to try to get Inlet Grove done. So I commit that to you. But again,
let me say this, Wanda, let me say this to the whole board. I want you all to remember what several of you have just asked us to do. Several of you just asked us to move projects forward. So how are we supposed to maintain a timeline if we keep getting calls from y'all to push things even further forward? So I want us to be reasonable around this. Like there's there's now been several people who have just said in the last 15 minutes, well, here's a new project I want y'all to think about. So you're gonna have to help me out on this one. So, when you think about how the money is spent, we're also in COVID. I also want us to acknowledge what we have been getting done and the things that are still breaking on a regular basis. So as I hear the conversation, I want the entire board to be clear. if you keep asking us to move all the projects forward, I want you to tell me how we're supposed to get it done. If everybody keeps asking us to do this one, okay, now I want this one. And now I'm sounding frustrated because I'm like, are we hearing ourselves collectively right now? That we want all of the projects that were supposed to be spread out over a course of 10 years to be done today. And so that's what I'm curious about. Is the entire board asking us to move every project forward now? I got to figure, I don't understand that.
Go ahead, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. Well, so in response to that, like, I'm glad that it's clear that the board gives direction collectively, but we are entitled to wish, right? And, you know, you're the superintendent because you're the one that has to do the balancing act and then tell us when in reality, because of whatever the issue is, you can't make our dreams come true right now, right? And that's essentially what I was asking Mrs. Paul, right? So let me just go on to something else, which is a wee bit related, but not a facilities or capital issue, really. And so I understand that we are talking about the capital budget, but budget is budget to me, and I just want to throw this out there. So we know we have this upcoming budget crisis, and so I would just like to know at a later date how we propose to evaluate the potential cuts that will be needed, assuming things go as bad as predicted, how we're going to evaluate things, one, through an equity lens, two, while valuing our role in promoting and maintaining social emotional wellness, and three, while acknowledging that we have watched young people suffer with the summer slide and the COVID-19 slide, and how do we propose to put the resources in place for them to catch up. Now, I get that I'm off topic. This is not a capital budget issue. I'm asking for that later. And I'm really putting out there because there was a point in time when we looked at the whole capital plan and we tried to take it. We didn't call it an equity lens, but we tried to look at it really, honestly, from an equity standpoint. And that's actually how those new schools in the Glades got built, because just via budget and student count, it wouldn't have been justified. But we as a board, through that process we went through long ago, looked at it and thought that we wanted to provide whatever we could to help the children in that community, right? And so I just want to put it out there that we're coming through a budget crisis. I hope we don't start cutting the things, the traditional things, which tend to happen to aggravate the disparities. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I just would like Dr. Fenoy to come back to us at a later date with a thoughtful sketch of a plan on how you would propose to do that. Not just from the capital side, but from the academic side too. And I'm done for now. Thank you.
No, I would definitely commit to that. We haven't actually had that conversation yet, but obviously we're going to have to keep more close on that one. So I totally agree with that, Robert.
I got 4 board members who want to speak in this order: Mr. Shaw, Ms. McQuinn, Mrs. Andrews, and Ms. Brill. Mr. Shaw, you're first.
Thank you. My question is for Mrs. Evans. The conversations that we've been having related to funding and everything, and the potential budget issues that we have, is one of the things based upon these conversations that we need to do at some point is going to, we've got to take a look at if we really see a big decrease in the amount of dollars available from the sales tax, and we have to make changes in our capital plan. Has there been any discussion by staff on how we do that? And is there a realistic possibility that what now is a 10-year plan is actually a 15 or 20-year plan because of financial issues? And I know that's projecting, but is that something that's been on your radar screen?
Yes, we actually have been having conversations and looking at options. Those conversations I've been having with Cork. We've had some of them with ISOC. looking, and I'm not sure if we had a workshop planned, and I think Ms. Paul was going to do that just before we were all sent home in March to talk about some of the potential shortfalls with the sales tax. So we're working through that right now. At one point, the sales tax, as I mentioned in the beginning, was coming along at 115% of projections, which would have given us extra money that would have helped solve those problems. Now, it just depends on how quickly we recover, and we'll have to look at the total sales tax and see how much revenue we have. And Ms. Paul may want to chime in on this as well, because her team really have the front lines in trying to figure out how to get projects done within budget, because our construction costs have been rising. Costs of materials are going up, and that does make it hard to do everything we plan to do. But it's something that we are certainly monitoring and watching.
So this is Wanda Paul again, and that goes back to our discussions on cool, safe, dry, and bright, trying to prioritize kind of what we need to do in some of the schools to meet budget. And as budgets or as projects come in, if they're over budget, we try to make sure that we take care of the key essential things that keeps that building operating for an additional 15, 20 years. And so we are working through that. I did, prior to the break, let's call it that, did want to present that information. Some of the board members I presented to you or presented it on the phone or at our one-on-ones, but I can definitely revisit that going forward to kind of give you some idea of what we're dealing with.
Okay, Mrs. McQuinn?
My questions have been answered. Thank you. No more. I need no more follow-up.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. I have two, and maybe Ms. Paul, you can help me offline. We've been out, as you know, since March. I worry as we open schools for the brick and mortar real soon, the conditions of Wellington Elementary. I know we got the contract and everybody was supposed to be working while we're out. So I'm hoping that those modules over at Wellington Elementary, we cannot put any children in there with this pandemic. So hopefully that's a good thing. That's going to be easy, that you're going to tell me that's all taken care of. Same thing for some of the issues at Wellington High School in those bathrooms and some of those areas that have been just truly sort of deplorable, that those things have been fixed during these months that we've been out. And
so, in regards to Wellington High School, we did not change the floor. That's part of the original floor, and the only thing that we can do is sandblast it. As you know, our team never really stopped working. Our maintenance team, as well as our custodial team, we've worked all through the summer to make sure that the buildings were cleaned, and again, with the additional requirements for COVID, enhanced cleaning. So our teams never really stopped. So we accelerated a lot of the projects in regards to chiller replacements and those kind of things. But yeah, we work very closely right now. We're trying to decide when do we go back to the other shift that we use when kids are in school, when the students are in school. And so that's kind of what we're working on right now. But we have worked continuously to improve the condition of our schools.
Yeah, especially Wellington Elementary, where we did get the new contract that, you know.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to make sure of that one. And this one might be for Lee Ann and Mike. Do we have a plan? I know that Congress is on vacation. The Senate is still sitting on the money. Do we have a plan here in Palm Beach County of how we're working with the legislature to kind of put a push to kind of help us get that money? And maybe Ms. Solnett, I see her emails and sitting on the Council of Great City Schools. We need that money. And so we have to kind of come together all over the state, especially with the council districts. What is our plan to kind of put some pressure?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. I talked earlier about the impact to our state, and the only thing that might save us is another round of federal stimulus. I know Ms. Solnett is keeping a close eye on that. Right now, things are kind of dead in the water. There's not much going on. And we remain involved with the Council of Great City Schools But, I guess there's things we could do. If the board's interested, I think we could work with our legislative team and maybe, start firing off some letters to Congress, and see. I'm not sure what impact it'll carry, just being honest. But, it's a national issue. All school districts are beating the same drum. And a lot of people are hoping that something will come through eventually that will help schools in a meaningful way. What's been done to date is a fraction of what we received during the Great Recession through the AIR program.
Yeah, what I'll do is in response, I'll talk to the Chief of Staff, Ed Tierney, who works directly with our lobbyists, and we'll ask Rita to put a plan together to see what she can do to help the board advocate on behalf of the district. So I have Ed follow up with Mr. Salzman.
All right, Ms. Brill, you were next.
Thank you. And so I just had a couple comments for the superintendent and then one following up on the last. So with regard, Dr. Fenoy, to what you had just stated, I know we're all stressed by COVID, and communication, of course, is imperative amongst us. So my ask is that, and this goes back, and I know it's, I understand why at this juncture, but when a project is on schedule, I ask that it not be changed without telling the board member who's responsible for that area, so that, because we have to deal with the political fallout. And, if we don't know about it and then it comes up in a public meeting, it makes it very hard for us. And then the other thing is, and this is shame on me because I didn't notice the K-8 school in West Del Rey when we did the July update on the capital plan. But when a new project is also being added in one of our areas, just if somebody could advise us. I know there's 7 of us, but when it affects our individual areas, it's so much easier if we know before it comes out in a meeting like this, so that we don't get beaten up later on. And then just following up on what we just discussed, I think I saw something that FSBA is looking for our lobbying issues. So most certainly, I know Mr. Burke probably has a big wish list for the budget, but hopefully we can start speaking as a group and get it on a workshop, because there's a lot of things that I heard today as we talked about the capital plan that could be in our lobbying, along with what Mr. Shaw had brought up. So, I would ask that we start having those conversations so that we don't, usually it becomes a fire drill and we just rush to throw it together and send it up, to FSBA. And I'd like it to be more thoughtful. So thank you.
Ms. Brill, I can definitely commit to that. That's a simple ask. We can do that.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Mr. Superintendent, thank you, Mike and Leanne. The next one is the COVID operations workshop.
Hello, everyone. Chairman Barbieri, board members, and Superintendent Fenoy. I want to present the plan of how our operations division will support our campuses as we deal with the COVID situation. And if we can present. And next slide, please. And so these are some of the departments within the Division of Operations that will be supporting our campuses. This has been a collaborative effort with other departments across the district. And part of that collaboration is, of course, with the Council of the Great City Schools that we've gotten a lot of information from. Let's move next slide, please. Our mission is to safely transport students to and from school, provide nutritious meals, ensure a safe environment, and create building environments conducive to learning. And my team and the division, as well as our collaborative departments, are committed to a safe return of our students and staff to our campuses. Next slide, please. So maintenance, as I said before, has been extremely busy over the summer, and well, actually since March and into the summer. They've not stopped working. One of the things that we had to do, and I had many conversations with board members, especially Ms. Andrews, in regards to how do we keep our employees safe. So we gave them PPE, facial coverings, gloves, and so forth to make sure that they're safe while they're doing the work of the district. We are continuously providing ongoing training to our custodians, bus drivers, and attendants on sanitization procedures. We installed additional signage in common areas, and you can see that in a video that will follow my presentation. We installed plexiglass in common areas in the district, facilities, and schools. And one of the things I mentioned before that we are doing is we're upgrading our filters where possible, upgrading the Merv rating from 11 to 13. I know it sounds kind of geeky, but that's how filters are classified, and we will increase filter changes. Some of our systems are a little bit older and we're not able to upgrade the Merv, so we will increase our the changes on those filters. Next slide, please. So our Custodial Services department has been hard at work throughout the summer with our normal preparation for school, the common things of waxing or stripping and waxing the floors and cleaning. We also insisted and asked them to wear PPE at all times. When we go back to school to brick and mortar, we're going to need, it's going to take a village to do everything we need to do, and we're going to need teachers' assistants to, keep their area, their workspace clean, and then perhaps the high-touch areas in the different in their classrooms. We asked our custodians to work in groups of 2 to limit exposure among workers, and this was something that we felt was a necessity. A school is a social environment, and oftentimes we're used to eating lunch or with people and so forth, so we had to be very explicit with this. Again, we asked them to provide enhanced cleaning in high-touch areas. We have to take an active role in making sure that we have adequate custodial supplies, toilet paper, paper towels, soap. Our finance department, Darcy Gerbaz and her team in purchasing have been really great in making sure that we have the necessary supplies. They started this very early on when we first went out in March, and I want to thank them for their help in making sure that happened. Also, we have to have scheduled restroom sanitizing and stocking throughout the day, and continue our monthly building inspections to ensure a safe and clean environment. Our custodial coordinators are responsible for doing this, but as I said before, it takes a village. So as we see things when we go about in our schools and walk our schools, we need to make sure that we bring it to the attention of the principal as well as my team so that we can take care of it. Next slide, please. Our environmental services department that's headed by Paul Strauss has just been remarkable in their support of the district throughout this time. They are available to assist with providing sanitization supplies to facilities. So they've done a lot of research on what's best to use for us. They have responded to incidents of reported cases of COVID-19 since March and throughout the summer. They've done a remarkable job of being there at the right time and right place. They have assisted schools as necessary with designating quarantine rooms or space where if we have a child or a staff member that is exhibiting symptoms, they have a place to go. They continue to monitor and investigate indoor air quality concerns. I think this was something that was brought up before in a previous conversation today. That's something that we have to do as an ongoing measure, whether we're in a COVID environment or not. And so his team has been very instrumental in doing that. And then coordinating enhanced cleaning and sanitization opportunities at our schools with our selected vendors. And they do pre and post inspections to make sure that our vendors did what we actually needed them to do. Next slide, please. Our school food service, those are our superheroes that have been out on the front lines serving meals since we closed down in mid-March. Many of you have reached out and provided facial coverings and shields. Ms. Brill specifically for our school food service personnel, and we really appreciate that. And we wanted to give principals options in terms of how we deliver the meals. One thing we have to adjust to utilize alternative space for meal consumption. Meals to be received and consumed in the cafeteria, delivered to the classroom, or to an outdoor space. So we're having to leave all options open because one size does not fit all in terms of the way our schools are designed. Student IDs are utilized for lunch transactions, and you'll see this again later on when I talk about transportation. So it's a barcode ID that we are giving students to identify them, not only when they go through for meals, but also when they board the buses. Staff will utilize PPE at all times, so this is a common theme throughout. We will continue our grab-and-go service for distance learners, implementation of grab-and-go breakfast and lunch items to reduce wait time in cafeteria lines, so we'll do grab-and-go when we go to brick and mortar. Additional signage for social distancing in the lunch line and seating areas, and then, of course, daily enhanced cleaning. And so, again, you'll see this common theme throughout. Next slide, please. Transportation. We will have a mock workday for our bus drivers in attendance on August 28th. That's this Friday. And so we're excited we'll be excited to see them back at work. We got to keep these big yellow buses moving. And make sure that they're ready when we get the go signal to start brick and mortar. We are sanitizing all of our buses with the electrostatic sprayers. You see the picture there, and you'll also see it in the video. Our bus drivers and attendants will be trained on the proper sanitization procedures, and we need our bus drivers and attendants to sanitize all of our high-touch areas and between bus routes to make sure that our kids boarding the buses, have a clean environment. Our regular bus routes will be reviewed and adjustments made as needed. As I said before, we're running the same routes that we did last year, but of course we're going to have to make adjustments as we always do. We will try to have social distancing on buses where possible, but one thing that has to happen is that all students must wear facial coverings on the buses. This is so critical because, if we're not able to maintain social distancing, then we need to have that layer of protection. Also, we're very excited about the fact that we were able to install Wi-Fi on 50 buses. Now, the original intent of the Wi-Fi was to keep the kids busy while they're on the bus. And so many of them have cell phones and so forth. So while they're riding the bus, they probably can do homework or whatever off their mobile device. An added function was to try to use them to provide connectivity in some of our areas that did not have Wi-Fi and so forth. And so right now, it's not the most reliable. I've talked to other districts, and one of the main things is that it's kind of inconvenient for people to have to come to the buses, or they don't have transportation to the buses. But our IT department and Mike Burke's team has kind of worked out a plan to help with connectivity. And so the buses can be used as a backup. But again, it's just a good opportunity for students when we go to brick and mortar to have that availability of Wi-Fi on it. And then the student registration pilot program is in process. So basically that's the barcode, and we plan to use that for when our kids get on the bus. They'll scan in with the barcode. Now, let me be clear in terms of we're not going to deny anybody or any student service or the ability to get on the bus, but this also helps us do our big survey activities when we have to report to the state. Next slide, please. School police. Our school police department has worked throughout to support feeding sites and keep our buildings safe. when we return to school. They will be fully staffed, each school to comply with Senate Bill 7026 and Senate Bill 7030. And as Chief points out, it's the first time that all our schools will be staffed with our own police officers. So that's quite a feat, and we're pretty excited about that. They will continue all their safety initiatives and support social distancing, coordinate with all district departments and schools for safety and security issues through the Tactical Operations Center. So Chief has had us on lockdown since March in terms of the ability to come into Fulton Holland and so forth. And so you saw some of that with the 4 questions that are asked. And so we've been living with that for quite a while, but they've been very active, and I want to just thank them for all of their wonderful support. All police personnel will be using appropriate PPE, and then they're providing ongoing training on safety and security measures in preparation for the reopening of schools. And so, as you can see, our whole team has been very active in making sure that we get to this day where we can actually go back to brick and mortar. And again, I want to thank my whole division for just their unwavering dedication to this district. They've been wonderful, and I'm just really pleased to work with an organization such as this. And with that being said, I'll answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Ms. McQuinn, then Mr. Shaw, then Mrs. Andrews.
Okay. I don't frequently thank staff, only because I've said this before, I leave someone out. But Mrs. Paul has taken a bit of a beating tonight. Let's see, and that would be Lena. I can't tell you how many times, Mrs. Paul, that I tell the community, she's been ready for August 10th, starting back with May. And I know that you have absolutely continued to refine the process, and it just made things better for us to safely bring staff and students back to schools. But I think when people can see all of the departments that you just went through, it's remarkable. So please thank every single person in every single one of your departments. It's pretty remarkable what you've all done. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Mrs. McQuinn. Couldn't have said it better. Mr. Shaw was next. Microphone, Mr. Shaw.
Sorry about that. I also agree with what Mrs. McQuinn said, because it's been amazing what has happened. For Mrs. Paul, I know that there's always a challenge when we go out into the marketplace and get vendors who are expected to deliver. And what do you have in place if we have a vendor who essentially defaults on delivering things that we desperately need in our schools? Do you all have a contingency with other vendors so that if things are not being delivered and we do run into a problem with a vendor, that we have some type of protection for everybody?
So I've been in step with Mr. Burke on this, and Darcy Garbaz, who's been our purchasing director, who's been absolutely awesome. And they have just done a yeoman's job in trying to get us what we need. And it's changed. Let me tell you, it's changed several times. But if we have any issues with vendors and so forth, Darcy is typically the first call we make, and she just handles her business. And so we've been very fortunate thus far. And I would tell you, it has changed many times over in terms of what we thought we needed and what we actually ended up with and actually needed. And so one of the things that I want to say is that Mr. Burke and his team has been very flexible. I call them Gumby. They've been extremely flexible in this environment. And so far we've been very fortunate. We had issues with trying to get the electrostatic sprayers in, And I don't know who Darcy called or what she did, but she made it happen. And so we have 20 throughout the district. We use some of them on our buses, and then we'll use others as incidents arise. And so, again, we've just been very blessed as a district to work with a team like this.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. And Ms. Paul, you know, we spent quite a bit of time talking, and I just want to tell you that I really appreciate the leadership from you, as well as the leaders of your different departments, and then everybody that's on the ground. They've been on the ground since March. Custodian, maintenance, school food service, school police, they've been out there. And some of them have become sick. Some of them have gone through so many serious things just to help our children so that they could be ready to go back to school one day. And so I've been praying for them and so thankful for all of the work that they have been doing to get our school district back in place for brick and mortar. We love them. Many of these people don't get paid the high salaries. So we've got to find a way, Dr. Fenoy, to celebrate them whenever we can, because they truly deserve a celebration and a real thank you from all of us. And I worry about this food situation. You know, Ms. Paul, I was happy when you said that we're going to be able to have some of those 50 buses go out to the neighborhood, because we want to make sure that we know where children live and we can get them what they need. Computers as well as food. And so I don't know if you mentioned it too much, but I was thinking that there was going to be a piece where some of those buses would be able to deliver some foods. I know that with the federal government now and the monies that's being cut, school food service is the first place, because I mean, if you're not on reduced or mealings or free lunch, if you aren't filling these forms out, it's not going to be the way it was when we started back in March, where everybody could get some food to eat. And I'm still worried about that as we do distance learning, as we move into brick and mortar. And I really would like to hear from our school food service director, to thank her personally and to make sure that we're giving her every support we can to make sure that she has what she needs. But first of all, the school food service piece. Are we going to be able to do the kinds of things necessary so that children won't go hungry as we go into distance learning as well as brick and mortar?
So we will continue. The grab and go food service that we've been doing. We will expand it to include more facilities or more schools. And so all of our food service people will be in the schools supporting grab and go. In terms of, we call it Meals Off the Bus, we have a pilot program that's set to start September the 22nd if we are not back in brick and mortar. So we're trying to anticipate kind of, what the next step is. Allison, bless her heart, has been tremendous with her team and flexible, working with our communications department, Claudia and her staff, in trying to meet the needs of our district, our community partners, and so forth, and trying just to make sure our kids are fed. I don't think Allison has slept since March. And so once we get back in school, I'm probably going to have to give her a directive to go to sleep. And so we have plans in place. A lot of it just depends on, when we go back to brick and mortar as to whether we move forward with Meals Off the Bus, but she's preparing for that right now. We'll start with a pilot program, and depending on how long we go, we'll add additional buses over time. But I'm just really proud to work with the caliber of people that I have been able to work with since I've been here, my 3 years here. And I want to also thank the board for their support. That y'all have been tremendous in bringing out things that we need to improve on and guiding us in how we can get better. And then I would be remiss without thanking the leadership from Dr. Fenoy as one of his direct reports. I am just so proud to work with a leader of his caliber, because none of this would be possible without him giving us the opportunity to actually go out and do our job. So
that's enough. I don't want to hear more of that. But let me say this about Allison. So I want that the entire operations division, I think it's good for the public to understand that even though they were getting ready for COVID, they also had to deal with the blip on the hurricane horizon as well. And they did not skip a beat. The police department, the food service, the maintenance, Stacy Marshall, and all those people, we put online those shelters. And if, Lord forbid, we find ourselves in that situation in the next couple of weeks, they're going to respond to that. So I just wanted to share for the public to know, not only does that team manage us every day, but during crises such as hurricanes, they're part of that team with the county to prop that up. And so I don't know how many people really understand how much the operations division supports our hurricane shelters, and also our wonderful principals and staff that stay there throughout those nights for those families. So that's just something else that I don't think a lot of people truly understand about our principals, teachers, and our operations division as well.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. Dr. Robinson?
Okay, I was just checking to see, did the violin stop playing? Okay, I'm sorry. I just had to throw that in. Okay, so listen, I'm going to just tell you, I will acknowledge that everybody in the school district has been working hard and rising to the challenge. We are in these unprecedented times. It's mind-boggling, right? And so I'm sure there's a lot of work and details that people are doing that I know nothing about. So let me just praise them without even knowing, right? But I also see a lot of the work, right? And yep, I will give it to the operations side. I want to give it to the academic side too, right? And it's like everybody, right? And so I'm glad people are rising to the occasion to do the job that we have asked them to do, even the parts that we didn't see coming, right? But just trust and believe I will continue to push to try to help you be better. Okay, so let me move on. I'm glad to hear about the meals off the bus. That's cool, because I've heard that in the community a few times. And so I'm glad you are nurturing that seed that got planted. I'm also glad to hear you talk about that Merv 13. Now, I shared with, it seems like the whole world, that reopening schools recommendation from the Harvard School of Public Health, which is where I started my education about things I never wanted to know about, like Merv, right? And HVAC. I didn't want to know about all this, but I'm glad to hear that you said Merv 13, but I hate when we have the words like where possible, right? And so that same document, as well as I think it's American Academy of Pediatrics document, suggested that if for whatever technical reason we're not able to upgrade to the Merv 13, that we supplement with portable air cleaners. Are we planning to do that?
I think the way we plan to handle that is just to change the filters more frequently, so that we're able to pull more out of the air and stuff, not to use actual air scrubbers. We would need just a tremendous amount to be able to accomplish that, and the load on the school would probably be too much if we have one in every classroom. So I think that's not only cost prohibitive, but also functionally not possible. I think it would be.
Okay, so.
Yeah, so changing the filters more often kind of gives us that same or similar impact.
Okay, so I'm going to just ask you to email the reference for that.
Okay.
Because I'm like writing my own documents with references so that I'm comfortable and clear that what we're doing is based on
it's actually
what other people say.
It's actually at the end of the presentation, there's an appendix, and it specifically talks to EPA, air cleaners, HVAC filters, and coronavirus 19. So it should be a link for that.
So it's in there that is good enough to change the filters often? Okay, great. Thank you for that. Then I want to mention, okay, so first, so I'm the mother of boys, right? Well, they're men now. But, we use these terms sometimes and we're not all clear what they mean. So I would say clean your room, and their definition of clean their room was different than my definition, right? And so I just want to make sure that somewhere, you don't have to tell me now, but somewhere there's clarity on what deep cleaning means and what sanitizing means.
So we're
'Cause-
talking about, enhanced cleaning and sanitizing. So enhanced
Yeah.
means that typically we wipe down the classroom at the end of the day, disinfect it and that sort of stuff. We're going to have to be doing that throughout the day. And in addition to that, we'll have to also wipe down high touch areas like door handles, light switches, those kind of things. So that's what it means by enhanced. We're doing something additional that we normally wouldn't do.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm aware of, and this applies to both sides of the house, is because there's so much anxiety, fear, and concern around this, that I think that we need to try to be as explicit as possible when communicating with our staff. Everybody that I've talked to wants to rise to the occasion. They're just not crystal clear what it means, right? And so if you would just, I'm sure you know exactly what you're talking about, but if you would just, and on the academic side too, try to be as explicit as possible in communicating to the people that are supposed to do the work what the expectation is, right? Because what kind of disinfectant, how often you're supposed to wipe down. I just think we need to try to be as very clear as possible. Okay.
Understood.
And then I've got a couple more. So the buses, I didn't hear this. Now, I'm concerned about the buses, right? And I know it says social distancing where possible, right? I know you said wear the mask. I'm good. I heard you say like the layered approach, and that's exactly right. We had to have multiple layers of precautions, right? But that some of these documents talk about simple things like opening the windows. I'm assuming we can still open windows on buses, right?
So the challenge with that is that we're in sunny South Florida, and so by opening the buses on a really hot day, you have kids sweating on it and so forth. So it's and we could probably bring this to the superintendent's health advisory team, which you're a member on. But it's kind of like if you open the windows and kids are sweating, is that better than just having them cool with a mask on? And
so I would want the windows open with the mask on.
I'm
right?
sorry?
And I said I would want the windows open with the mask on, actually. But I'm just saying that I get we're in Florida and I get that it's hot and all that, right? But we're also in a pandemic. I'm just asking you to look at that with starting with yes, because it's highly recommended. And it's very clear. And then the other thing is these increasing number of articles coming out about aerosol transmission, which I actually, based on my understanding of pathophysiology, is not as high an issue as it's starting to be promoted that it is. But whatever it is, we want to do every precaution, right? And so that includes opening the windows. And then I think the last thing I want to say on this, though, is can we please look at doing plexiglass enclosures for the bus drivers? I understand Palmtran has them. I understand our transportation people have talked to Palmtran about the work that they did. Now, I'm not 100. I'm trying to be clear with what I know for certain and what I believe to be true. But I know for certain that the bus drivers are in high risk positions. And so I want us to look to see if we can do plexiglass for them.
I talked to the head of the union about 2 weeks ago about this. And so they're supposed to give me some information from Palmtran. I think I was told through another source that those were customized for those specific buses, like the manufacturer. So we would have to check with our manufacturers to see. Now, I'll be honest, I have not heard about that on any school bus in the country. I was on a call yesterday with some folks, with some superintendents. But let us look into that because it might be something we have to build ourselves if it's even possible.
Part of the challenges is that anything that we would do would not be approved by FDOE. So what has to happen is that it has to come from the manufacturer of the bus. And at this time, the manufacturer of the bus does not have a solution for this. But we'll check on that and just verify that again. But Shane Searchwell, Director of Transportation, looked into that, and we're not the same as Palmtran. Of course, we're pupil transportation, and we have different rules. But we'll definitely look into that again.
Thank you very
I
much.
think it also should be stated, just for the record, that the Florida Department of Transportation will not allow bus drivers to wear masks while they drive. And so you just need to know that. Now they can wear, they can't wear face shields, excuse me. Cannot wear face shields, they can wear masks. Because somebody asked us that question. So they can wear masks, they cannot wear face shields. And so the public needs to understand that.
I've got 3 board members who want to speak, so Dr. Robinson, hold off for a minute. Mrs. Andrews, then Ms. Brill, then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you, and I've been on this before, and I'm just going to say it again. I still think every teacher, and you said you couldn't actually use a thermometer, as kids are coming in, but I think every teacher needs to have a thermometer so that they can check the temperature. And then I worry too about the students that are getting on the bus. I know we've asked parents to make sure that they have checked the temperature, but I know that's not going to happen. So I'm still talking about it because we're checking the temperatures of people who are coming to our board meetings. And we're checking the temperatures of the visitors that come in. We've got to do a little better with getting some thermometers. I know it's hard to order things now because everybody's ordering these things, but that's something to look at. So I just still want to be on record with those temperatures. I think every teacher should have a thermometer as well as the bus driver. And also I'd like to say that when the buses start rolling, will there be some designations as to where the can or cannot sit? And maybe you already said that, Ms. Powell. Will there be some kind of markings for some places where they can or cannot sit?
Ms. Andrews, as I said before, it's going to be very difficult for us to have social distancing on the buses because we don't have enough drivers and we don't have enough buses to actually do it effectively. I've talked to several transportation directors, and they have the same challenge across the state. But what we can do is make sure that the kids have masks on and enforce that. So that's what I know, but we can definitely look into any other options. But right now, that's kind of what we're held to.
Yeah, I just want the public to understand that we will not leave children on the side of the road. So I've been getting emails about that. We will not be leaving children on the side of the road, and that's very important.
Ms. Brill?
Thank you. So, and thank you, Mrs. Paul, for everything you're doing. I don't say that enough, but I do appreciate everything. Staff's just been great on, as Dr. Robinson said, on all sides of the house. The area that really concerns me the most is the buses, because we aren't going to be able to socially distance. And when talking about opening the windows, I remember Dr. Fenoy's story about taking his little one, I think, to childcare, and the windows were open in the car. And I believe the temperature was too high of the child when they got there. So, that could skew things if we have the windows open. But, hopefully Mr. Searchwell will work with you, Mrs. Paul, when we do open up and we see which areas these buses are going to be overcrowded. I just have these visions of 3 children in a seat. And, and it's going to be our Title I schools. A lot of those families, they cannot drive their children to school. I know a lot of the families in my area are either keeping the kids home or going to drive them themselves. But if we can maybe put extra bus routes, if we see that we can shift some of the buses from different areas, I think that would be helpful because, it's just that's where I lose the most sleep. So I appreciate all your efforts that way.
Thank you, Ms. Brill. And that's part of the adjustments that we'll make throughout, once we return to brick and mortar. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So I want to thank Dr. Fenoy for mentioning that, because I had heard that bus drivers were not allowed to wear something. So now I understand they can't wear face shields, but they can wear masks, right? And so if that's correct, then I think that we need to make sure that they have N95 or KN95, because we need to, if we're not going to be able to do layers, those additional layers of protection for them, like plexiglass and so forth, we can at least get the KN95s or N95 masks for them. The other thing is, with the thermometer. So the points have been well made. So whoever though is going to be taking temperatures, whether it's at home or in Miss Andrews' scenario, the teachers need to be conscious that this is not the under the tongue one, it's a surface temperature. And so if they've been out in the sun, they're going to read higher at first, and so they need to let them cool down and recheck. And I don't have permission yet to say who, but I do want you to know that based on the conversation last week led by Ms. Andrews, I spoke to one of the foundations in our community who is looking at getting thermometers for parents based upon our policy saying we expect parents to do the screening at home. So hopefully that will develop and we'll be able to assist the parents in that route too. Thank you.
Let me just add for Ms. Andrews, we can't currently meet your specific request, but we have ordered several thousand more thermometers so that the schools will have multiple, so that the health clinic, so that there'll be multiple people in the schools that will have them. We've heard from advice from across the country. We probably have to bargain and make teachers take temperatures, and it would be too many people doing that. So Mr. Burke has just ordered a series of more so that schools will have multiple working thermometers on campus. But now that Dr. Robinson's brought up that good point, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate training for whoever uses the things associated with their quarantine rooms in the building. So I just want to let you know, Ms. Andrews, based on our conversation last week, we did order significantly more so that schools can have many in hand. We just will not be buying one for 23,000 teachers. That won't be happening. I mean, for the entire 13,000 member teaching population, we won't be doing that.
All right, is there any more discussion? Mr. Shaw? Of course.
I want to try to be cautious as how I say this because it's going to sound negative towards students, but this is a sense of reality. And any of us that have been in education for a long period of time realize that there are times that kids do not necessarily comply with everything that teachers ask them to do. And I hope that as we make some of these decisions where we're expecting teachers to comply with certain things like the issue of taking temperatures and some of the other things, there will be children that are going to test teachers. And I hope that as we go through this, that we're sensitive, that we're not creating an issue for teachers that makes it difficult for them when sometimes kids don't always necessarily behave.
All right, any more comments?
Mr. Chairman, Paul has one final piece of our presentation we'd like to show the board.
So, Mr. Barbieri, Mr. Oswald will queue up a video that our communications team made for the board member and the public. So, Mr. Oswald.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. And I too want to thank Ms. Paul and her entire team and for their partnership to really help support our principals. Obviously, there's many departments really working closely with our principals. Their priority has been distribution of devices to our community as well as setting up with internet. But at the same time, they've got to take all this other information and get our schools ready for brick and mortar for when that moment comes. So again, thanks to your team, Ms. Paul, Mr. Burke, everybody's help, and in particular our principals. This is a sneak preview of what's to come for our students in the near future.
Whether returning to elementary, middle, or high school, when campuses reopen, things will look different. Bus riders will board the bus with facial coverings on. Drivers will sanitize between routes, and electrostatic sprayers will be used routinely to sanitize buses. At school, students and staff will be greeted with health-related signage, alerting them that campuses are now modified to reduce possible exposure to COVID-19. Plexiglass barriers are in place in the main office and other common areas. Visitor access will also be limited to those who have an appointment. From the moment students arrive, they will move through the hallways in controlled patterns. Reconfigured classroom spaces will allow adequate distance during learning. facial coverings are required for students and staff on campuses and while attending extracurricular activities in accordance with CDC guidelines. All faculty, students, and staff should perform daily health assessments at home and stay home when feeling ill or experiencing a body temperature of 100.4 or higher. During school, students exhibiting COVID-like symptoms will be isolated and sent home. Regular hand washing is recommended. Schools are equipped with ample supplies of soap and paper towels. In addition, hand sanitizing stations are being placed throughout campuses. Meals will be consumed in cafeterias, classrooms, or outdoor dining spaces using social distancing practices. Every evening, district custodial teams will clean schools, buses, and buildings, paying extra attention to high touch points. Air conditioning filters with a higher Merv rating are being used where possible. Other filters will be changed more frequently. The School District of Palm Beach County is committed to school and community safety and looks forward to welcoming all students to our campuses.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentations and our workshops for today.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Before we leave, though, go ahead, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. I really like that video. I think videos are a very, very important means of communicating and teaching, especially nowadays, especially for young people. And I couldn't find it. I don't know if we have it, but we need to have a video that shows students and adults about how to don and doff a mask, right? Because in that video, somebody was touching the front of their mask, which is like, ooh, that's against the rules, right? But the other thing is just the whole issue of making sure you keep it above your nose. Because I see that all the time where people have their masks below their nose and just covering their mouth. So if we don't have such an informative video, if we can create one and then as people come on campus, make sure that they see it, please.
Duly noted. Yeah. And I think this might be an opportunity, now that you're making me think about it, you know, a lot of our schools have televisions in their front offices. So it might be good for certain things to play in a loop. So, so maybe what we can do is think about some other things that we put a kind of a montage together that just loops in the schools on a continuous basis. And they can put links on their website. So maybe what we can do, I think that is a yes on the mask, but I'll talk to some of the health advisory committee members and see what other things we might want to demonstrate for faculty, staff, and students and parents. I think that's a fantastic idea.
All right, so if there's nothing else, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Before we do that, though, IT has requested a 5-minute break. They have to change some tapes, or I didn't think we still use tapes, but they're changing something to get ready for the board meeting. So if we have a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, second by Dr. Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene at 4:45.